Welcome to the Facilitators Deep Dive Podcast, your podcast on your way to facilitation mastery. Today we're looking at how rapid change impacts us as individuals.
Okay.
And we're going to be using the book Change-Harakiri, which I think it's fair to say translates pretty directly to Kiss My Ass Change.
That's a pretty direct translation, yeah, for those who don't speak German.
Right.
And it digs into that human side of all the changes happening in business right now.
Yeah, like how are we supposed to keep up with it all, you know? What are the strategies?
Right.
And can we really handle all this change, or are we all just like...
Yeah, are we all just going to crack?
Yeah, are we just going to crack?
Yeah, and that's really what we're trying to figure out in this deep dive, right?
Yeah, and what I like about this book is that it doesn't hold back at all.
Yeah.
Like it starts with this really intense visual...
Oh, yeah, the caterpillar.
Yeah, comparing employees going through constant change to a caterpillar slowly being crushed between book covers.
It's a pretty disturbing image.
Right. Yeah, and it definitely like makes you feel the weight of all that pressure.
Yeah.
You know, I've definitely felt that caterpillar in the book feeling.
Yeah. Okay.
Especially in the past few years. I mean, so much has changed.
Absolutely, and that's what the book calls change fatigue.
Right. Okay. So change fatigue.
It's like we're hit with so much change all the time that it just gets to be too much.
Yeah.
And we start to feel exhausted and cynical even.
Right. Like you just like shut down.
Exactly. And you know, the book doesn't just talk about these feelings generally. It actually introduces you to people who are going through it.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So there's Brigitte, a skilled support professional who, after a merger, gets pushed into this dead-end job.
Oh, it's a tough.
In her story, it shows how change, when it's managed poorly, can make you feel totally devalued. Like your skills don't matter anymore.
Yeah, the worst.
And then there's Fabian, who's in payroll, and his job gets outsourced to Romania.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so it's that fear of becoming obsolete.
Right.
Like what we know how to do now is suddenly not valuable anymore.
Right. Like, am I going to be the next Fabian?
Exactly, and that's a key question the book explores.
Right. And it also shows how different generations view change.
Really?
Yeah, like Teresa, this young employee, she's totally fine with things like agile working, while her older colleagues are totally panicking.
Oh, wow. So it's like they're speaking totally different languages when it comes to change.
It really is. But what's interesting is even Teresa, who seems so adaptable, she starts looking for resilience training.
Really? Even her?
Even her. So maybe none of us are immune to the pressure.
Right. So it's not just about being good or bad at adapting. It's
Yeah.
deeper than that.
Exactly. And the book gets into that darker side with statistics about rising stress and something called Anpassungsstörungen.
Anpassungsstörungen.
Yeah, it means adjustment disorders. It's a German term.
Okay, so what kind of symptoms are we talking about?
The book mentions cardiovascular problems, digestive issues, trouble concentrating, even mood swings and depression.
Wow. So this is serious stuff.
It is.
Yeah.
And it also talks about this phenomenon called Gefangen am Arbeitsplatz, which translates to prisoners at work.
Okay, prisoners at work. That sounds bleak.
It is. It's about those older employees who stay in jobs they hate because they're too scared to leave.
Right, they're trapped by that fear of change.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So on one hand, you have all this rapid transformation in the workplace.
Right.
And on the other hand, you have people really struggling to cope with it all.
Yeah, it's a tough situation for everyone.
Mm.
And the book points to digitalization as a big driver of this change.
Absolutely. It's like a double-edged sword.
How so?
Well, you have all these new leadership models popping up, like holacracy,
Bureaucracy.
where there are no job titles and everyone's supposed to share in the decision-making.
That sounds pretty radical.
It is. And the book does mention that there's a lot of skepticism about whether it actually works.
Yeah, like, is it actually better or just different?
Exactly. And then there's automation.
Right, the robots are coming for our jobs.
That's the fear, right?
Yeah, and the book even cites a study from Oxford that something like 47% of jobs in the U.S.
Yeah, and 42% in Germany
could be automated.
at risk, right? They even have this example of a bank Kaufmann-Frau, so like a bank clerk.
Yeah, okay.
And this website, Job Futuromat, says that 38% of their tasks could be automated.
Wow. Okay, so we've got all this technology pushing things forward at lightning speed.
Right.
But isn't technology supposed to be part of the solution too?
Well, the book talks about things like health apps and online learning platforms to help us deal with the stress and learn new skills.
Okay, but is that really enough?
That's the big question. And the book argues that technology on its own isn't enough. What we really need is human-centered change management.
So it's about taking care of the people going through these changes.
Exactly. It's recognizing that people are at the heart of any successful change.
Yeah, it's not just about implementing new systems.
Right.
It's about understanding how those changes impact people's lives and giving them the support they need to actually thrive.
You got it.
Okay, so it's about more than just surviving change. It's about finding a way to actually thrive in the midst of it all.
Exactly. And in the next part, we'll get into some of the strategies the book suggests for building that resilience and becoming more proactive.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
I'm ready for some solutions.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've seen how change can be, really tough on a personal level.
Yeah.
But what about those of us who think we're handling it fine? Like we think we're adaptable.
Right.
The book brought up this thing called the false hope syndrome.
Oh, yeah.
And that really got me thinking, because I am so guilty of falling for those quick fix promises.
The false hope syndrome, it's interesting,
Right.
because it shows how our own expectations can actually sabotage us.
Sure.
It's that thinking that change is going to happen quickly and easily, and when it doesn't, we're just disappointed.
Totally. The book had this example of a manager who sends his team to a negotiation training
Yeah.
and then expects them to be master negotiators right away.
Like it's a magic wand.
Right. Like it's a magic wand.
Right.
It's like thinking you can run a marathon after a week of jogging.
Yeah.
You've got to build up to that kind of change.
Exactly. It takes time.
But what gets me is I genuinely believe those quick fixes will work.
Right.
How do we avoid falling into that trap?
Well, a big part of it is recognizing that real change, it takes time. It's a journey, not a sprint.
Okay, a journey, not a sprint.
I like that. And the book really emphasizes being patient with ourselves and with the process.
Yeah. But that's tough, especially at work, when everyone wants results yesterday.
It is tough, for sure.
So how do we balance that need for patience with all that pressure to perform?
That's where the book brings in this change balance model.
Okay, the change balance model.
It's a visual tool that helps you see where you stand with all the change swirling around.
Okay, I like visuals.
So picture a graph with two axes.
Got it.
One is change pace, how fast things are changing.
Makes sense.
And the other is change scope, how much the change affects you personally.
Okay, so like how big of a deal the change is for me.
Exactly.
Right, so I'm picturing this graph.
Okay, good.
What are the categories?
Well, it breaks down into 4 quadrants. Balance exhaustion, not my thing, and then self-inflicted violence.
Whoa, self-inflicted violence.
Yeah.
That sounds intense.
It is. It's the danger zone.
So where do most people fall on this graph? Like, are most people balanced?
Well, ideally, we'd all be in that balance zone, right?
Boy.
Where the pace and scope feel manageable. It's like you're in the flow, adapting without getting totally overwhelmed.
Right, like you're keeping your head above water.
Exactly. But if the pace gets too fast, you can slip into exhaustion.
Even if the changes themselves aren't that big.
Yeah, it's like death by 1,000 paper cuts.
Ouch.
And then there's not my thing. That's when the change itself is just too much, even if it's slow.
Okay, so like, imagine being asked to do a job that you just completely disagree with.
Exactly.
Or that requires skills you hate.
Yeah, I can see how that would lead to problems.
And then there's that self-inflicted violence zone.
So what does that look like? Like, what pushes someone into that zone?
That's when the pace and the scope are both just too much.
Oh, wow.
You feel totally out of control, like you're drowning in change. That sounds awful.
It is. It's a recipe for burnout.
Okay, so how do we actually use this model?
Well, the book has some questions to help you figure out which quadrant you're in.
Oh, so it's like a self-assessment.
Exactly. It's about honestly assessing how fast things are changing and how much those changes are affecting you.
So basically figuring out your own personal change balance.
Exactly. Know thyself, right.
Yeah, the more we understand our own relationship with change, the better we can navigate it.
Exactly. And once you know where you are on the graph, the book offers specific advice for getting to that balance zone.
So it's like having a personalized change GPS.
I like that analogy.
So we've talked about pitfalls and this tool for assessing ourselves. But what about leaders? They're the ones often pushing for these changes in the first place.
Right. And that's where the book uses this analogy of the big boss and the leaky bucket.
Okay, the leaky bucket. I'm intrigued.
It's a great way to visualize the impact of change on a team. So the manager is looking at a circle that represents his team. Each employee is a smaller circle within that big circle.
Got it.
And these smaller circles are in different quadrants. Some are in balance, some are in exhaustion, some in not my thing, and maybe a few in self-inflicted violence.
So it's showing how everyone's experiencing the change differently.
Exactly.
And if too many people are in those negative zones, the whole team starts to suffer.
Right. like a bucket with holes in it.
Yeah, it starts to leak.
Exactly. And the book stresses that leaders need to be aware of each person's capacity for change. You can't just assume everyone can handle the same level of disruption.
Right, so it's not one size fits all.
Definitely not.
Okay, so what's the takeaway for leaders? What are they supposed to do with this information?
Well, the book calls for a more human-centered approach to change management.
What does that mean practically?
It's about open communication, empathy, and providing the support people need.
Okay, so less top-down, more collaborative.
Exactly.
This makes me think about the older employees we talked about earlier. Do you think they get overlooked in all this?
The book suggests that while older employees might be less likely to leave their jobs during change,
Right, they've got that stability.
they might also struggle more to adapt to the demands of constant change.
Yeah, they might have built their careers on predictability.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And for them, this relentless pace of change can be really jarring.
And it goes back to those prisoners at work. They might feel trapped.
Absolutely. And the book emphasizes that leaders need to create a culture that values the experience of older employees while also giving them opportunities to learn and grow.
Right, so it's not about saying, you're too old for this.
Definitely not. It's about recognizing that age isn't a barrier to change. It's just a different perspective.
Yeah, it's a different set of experiences and skills.
Exactly. And that leads to another big question. What happens when change is so fast and so big that it changes the nature of work itself?
We're already seeing that, right? With automation, AI, the gig economy.
Right. The idea of a job is changing.
Yeah, it's not your grandfather's career path anymore.
Yeah, definitely not. And the book touches on this idea that we might be moving towards a future where individuals are more like Arbeitskräfteunternehmer.
Arbeitskraftunternehmer.
Right. It means workforce entrepreneurs.
So we all become our own little startups.
In a way, yes. It means taking charge of your own career, constantly updating your skills, and marketing yourself.
That's both exciting and terrifying.
It is. It's a whole new way of thinking about work.
It's like the rules of the game are changing, and we all need to adapt or get left behind.
It requires a whole new set of skills. Adaptability, resilience, the ability to learn on the fly, and to be okay with uncertainty.
So basically, we're all becoming lifelong learners.
It seems that way.
But in all this talk about skills and technology, I can't help but wonder if there's something deeper going on here. Something about who we are as humans in this crazy changing world.
Yeah, it feels like we've been focusing on all the stuff happening around us.
Right.
Like technology and the job market and all the pressure to keep up.
Yeah.
But what about what's happening inside us? You know, our values, our sense of purpose. That's where the book gets really interesting. It argues that when everything's changing so fast, our values become even more important. They're like our anchor, you know, helping us make decisions that feel right, even when everything feels chaotic.
So it's about making sure the changes we make or the changes that are forced on us
Right.
actually line up with what we believe in.
Exactly. The book uses the example of Bernd, a product manager in the music industry.
Okay, the music industry. Talk about a sector that's gone through some massive changes.
I know, right?
From CDs to downloads to streaming. It's been a wild ride.
Totally. And Bernd was able to adapt to all of that while staying true to his core value, his love of music.
I love that. So it's not about resisting change altogether. It's about finding a way to make it work for you.
Exactly. And what's cool is that becoming a dad actually helped him see things differently.
Really?
Yeah, it gave him a fresh perspective on work-life balance and helped him prioritize what really mattered.
So fatherhood helped him clarify his values.
In a way, yeah. It's like he developed this internal compass that kept him grounded no matter what was happening around him.
Okay, that makes sense. But it also sounds really challenging, especially in a work culture that often prioritizes speed and results over everything else.
It's definitely not easy.
Like, how do we create space for that kind of reflection?
Well, the book argues that it's absolutely essential for our well-being and ultimately for organizations to be successful too.
Right.
When people feel like their work has meaning and aligns with their values, they're more motivated and more resilient when things change.
So it's not just about feeling good, it's about performing better too.
Exactly. Values-driven decisions create a sense of purpose and build trust, which are so important when you're trying to navigate change.
It makes me think about what we talked about earlier, the need for human-centered change management.
Right.
It's about recognizing that we're not just cogs in a machine, we're individuals with our own values and dreams.
Absolutely. And those things need to be part of the equation when it comes to change.
This whole conversation makes me think of that phrase, safe to be human.
I love that.
It's like we started by talking about all the pressure and the fear of being left behind.
Right.
But at the end of the day, it's about remembering who we are. and what matters to us, and making sure those values are guiding us.
Yeah, you nailed it. Change is inevitable, but it doesn't have to crush us.
This deep dive has been amazing. We've covered so much ground,
We have.
from the psychological effects of change to strategies for dealing with it, and now this deeper level of connecting with our values.
It's been quite a journey.
Thank you so much for taking us on this ride.
My pleasure. It's been great. And as we wrap up, I want to leave everyone with one final thought. What's one small step you can take today to feel more resilient and more in line with your values? Maybe take a few minutes to think about what really matters to you, or have an honest conversation with your boss about your needs.
Those are great ideas.
Because change is a constant, but how we respond to it, that's always a choice.
That's a great reminder. Thank you to everyone for joining us on this deep dive. We hope you found some useful insights and tools to help you on your own journey.
Absolutely.
And remember, you're not alone in this. By being self-aware, seeking support, and advocating for a more human-centered approach to change, we can create a future of work that's not just efficient, but also meaningful and fulfilling. See you next time on the Facilitators Deep Dive Podcast, your podcast on your way to facilitation mastery. Until next time.
See you then.